So what's going to happen here is we're going to get the FaceTime call going, and then what you're probably going to need to do is come. Did we decide, Alex, this seat? You might, when you ask your questions, you're going to have to like make the trip down to here. Really dig back.
Yes, totally.
Right. And I told him, I said, you give us, we're going to just watch this thing, so. Is this just the moment where you'd like to have yourself broadcast all in front of everybody and live streamed?
Yeah.
Well, okay. How are we doing there, sir?
So we're ready to call him?
All right, so wait a minute. Where do we go to talk to him here? Okay, do you see me? Do you see me? Okay, I see me. All right, so there's a little bit of a lag, and you guys want to come here? All right. Don't be afraid to tweet. Could you please tweet some stuff? Because we're a lot of tweet. I think I've made this clear. It's hashtag FoleyKnight capital K. Yes. Yes. Well, that's pretty good. You can do a comment, or you can do the questions. Remember, everybody had a question. Don't feel free to ask him that. So did we figure out how to get the tweets going nearby there?
Oh, you want him up here too?
Well, are we going to do the tweets up there, Alex?
I mean, I can, but just, I can't do this full screen.
Are we going to do the tweets up or no?
They just put the blog, so the tweet thing's on the side behind there, yeah.
I don't know if it refreshes though.
Or even just, oh, I remember what we were gonna do. Just go to this tab, and then
Oh,
like
look, there's
Let me
Kelsey.
make sure this is
go.
good.
They just put the blog, so the tweet thing's on the side. Go here,
Live, we're going live.
and then just when those new tweets, move it over to the side. All the way, move this window all the way, and then move the FaceTime over here.
Squeeze this.
I don't even know what to tweet.
I think it actually, the whole FaceTime will fit like right here.
Yeah, one tweet.
And then when the new tweets load, just click on them so they come out.
Okay.
We are streaming. There we go.
Yeah, wait, what's this? What's this like effectively?
What? So,
What are you doing?
It's like 5-second lag.
Kelsey Hammond's not here. She's gonna tweet
Yeah,
it.
That's where you live stream.
She's watching you guys.
Yes, that's all. Like on my blog.
You can, you can go watch the live stream right now.
Okay, forget it. It's just, Jake, just be prepared to have your mind blown. Okay, here we go. We ready? Want to do the call? Let's do it.
Oh boy.
You could be hired. You said, okay,
Maybe like
all right.
full screen it?
We can't, can you make the FaceTime?
Can you guys see me?
Yes. Yes. Can you see us?
Sure. Yes,
We
I
look
can. I can turn on the lights. It's too dark, but that's okay, I guess.
Well, we just watched it, and everybody is busy talking about it and having a conversation. And
All right.
it was very emotional for a lot of us, but very powerful. Really brought up great comments and questions about both conflict journalism and sort of how you went about the process of making the decisions you made about the film. So, does anybody want to start off?
Did you guys?
Yes, go ahead.
Did you guys just finish?
We did.
Yes.
Okay, right.
You
Yeah.
might, if
Do
you
you
could.
want me to answer some, or do you want me to answer your questions, or you just want me to start talking about some things based on what you just asked?
Why don't you start us off talking about some things, and then we'll get the questions going. Talk about some things.
Sure. Well, so I, as you guys know, I went to Kingswood, Carpenter, grew up in Wolfboro, right there on North Main Street, and was in Carpenter Elementary for, and then Kingswood. And Jim, as you know, grew up in our town as well. And, you know, we had been friends. Jim moved to Wolfboro in 81, I believe. And that's when we became friends. And, you know, we stayed friends our entire lives. And, you know, I kept in touch with him while he was in Libya and in Syria. And, you know, he was just obviously like one of my best friends. So when he was killed, you know, there was a lot of, I don't know how you guys heard about it or saw it, but, you know, there was a lot of kind of just negative, you know, not negative press, but just the way that the image of Jim was being used, you know, throughout the world was just, I was very uncomfortable with, because, you know, there were politicians who were using that image to propagate their own agendas, and there was kind of sensationalism, and, you know, just a lot of things that I was, you know, just made me really uncomfortable, and it hurt. So, you know, the Foley family had been approached by a number of people, I think, to try to tell Jim's story, and I asked that. I almost felt kind of this responsibility for Jim and to tell his story, because I wanted it to be told from a very intimate and personal side. And, you know, I've known the Foleys my whole life, and you know, I knew his friends. You know, I became friends with all those guys. Like, he did Teach for America, so you know, his friends even after Kingswood. You know, Tom, who was in the film, the guy who's sitting in the bar, is one of his, you know, his best friend from Marquette, where he went to school. And you know, so I knew those guys, and through the help of Diane Foley, Jim's mom, I was able to kind of get in touch with his colleagues, you know, who reported with him in Syria, Nicole, all those guys that you saw in the film, and of course the hostages that I was able to connect with through the Foleys as well. So, you know, it was a tough decision, obviously, to make the film, but ultimately I just kind of thought that someone was going to do something at some point, and I wanted to kind of be the person to do that. So, you know, I started filming pretty much like 3 months after he had been killed. So, you know, it's been a pretty quick, like, making of the film. And it is about 14 months, which is, you know, in filmmaking, you know, production, that's a pretty quick turnaround. So that's kind of how it all started. And then, of course, as I started to get into the film, you know, there was a lot of other new, when you make documentary films, it's obviously a complete discovery process as well. And so, you know, I kind of learned a lot of things and discovered things along the way that became really important, I think, topics for, you know, for the film. Ultimately, I think the thesis of the film is about kind of answering the question of why Jim and quite frankly, all of his colleagues who are journalists, you know, continue to go back to these areas. I think a lot of people questioned, you know, why did he go back there, and what was he doing? And he knew it was dangerous, and why do these journalists do what they do? And I think that's a really important question. And so through the journalists and through the hostages, and ultimately, I think what, you know, the Foleys kind of discovered was answering that question on why he went back. Because it's a very kind of layered answer, with a lot of different kind of opinions about that. So that was kind of one of the themes that came through. And then, of course, you know, you get into all this, you know, these bigger themes about family and you know, family members doing things that you might necessarily agree with, and kind of coming to terms with that and understanding people. there's obviously a kind of good versus evil theme going on in this, and what exactly designates those, and so, these are all the kind of, I think, topics that the film not necessarily like hits you over the head to answer, but brings to the surface, and that can make people.
Oh, no.
People kind of talk that political climate that we're living in right now. It's, a lot of this stuff is, I think, really, really relevant to, to our lives. And so I'm happy that kind of this small story about Jim and my friendship with him and what I was able to kind of discover about his life is kind of, I think, the people who have watched the film have really found a lot of different, different kind of messages, and kind of look at themselves as kind of, what am I doing with my life, and so yeah, I think that's kind of been a really nice thing. Ultimately, as horrible as what we've all experienced, I do hope, and I think that it is a triumphant film. I think that the way Jim lived his life and what he was doing and what he was trying to do, I think is all very, it's all very special, and I think we can learn a lot from how he conducted himself and how he lived. So there you go. That's my intro for you.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys want to
Sure.
start some questions? We're gonna see how you can hear. So just let us know if we need people to come down here, whether you can hear us in the auditorium when it just gets asked. Okay.
Okay.
Isaac.
What was like do you feel is the most important message, or just most important thing for people to take away from this film about this whole situation?
Right. I mean, the most important, I think the most important is kind of what I was saying about why journalism is really relevant and important for civilization. I think that to understand why war correspondents and conflict journalists go into these areas to tell these stories, I think that we really need to support what they do, because they are, risking their lives to bring us information that we would not know otherwise. And I think it's important to know, you think about history, and you think about, World War I and World War II and Vietnam, and those are our big conflicts. But can you imagine not having the photos and videos from these conflicts? It's history, and ultimately this is how we understand the world. And not having these kind of images and videos, how do you move forward as like a civilization if you don't understand history? And so I think, in 50 years from now, when the world looks back at what's going on in Syria and Libya and these revolutions and the Syrian refugee crisis, these are things that are important, and that we need to, I think anyway, that we need to learn from. And so I think understanding the most important thing to take away is to acknowledge and realize how important journalists are to the world, and how we need to support them.
What were Alex's questions?
No, I just.
We have questions being tweeted in, and Alex over here
Okay.
is going to, he's our social media liaison, and he will be asking you one of those right now. Alex, take it away.
Very
All right.
fancy.
We got one from Twitter here. So,
Can you hear it? I'll move out of the way.
A little bit.
what did you learn about Jim in the making of the film? And did anything you learned about him surprise you?
It's a good question. You know, the film is kind of two halves. It's the first half before we lose him into Syria is a lot from his point of view. You know, he spoke a lot at Marquette and those are the things that I kind of knew about him already. And the second half of the film is when, you know, after he gets kidnapped in Syria, the point of view switches from the hostages that he was with. And so what I learned about Jim, of course, was what happened during those 2 years in captivity. You know, for those 2 years, we didn't know where he was. We didn't know who had him. We didn't know if he was alive or not. And so that process of interviewing those former hostages, Daniel and Pierre and Didier and Nicholas, you know, I learned so much about what was going on during that captivity, and how Jim was interacted with them, of course, and just kind of the humanity that came from that, you know, from that situation. But at the same time, like, none of the things that I learned surprised me, because Jim was always this guy who was you know, he was like the constant glue, you know, the cement between the bricks kind of thing. And you know, the fact that he was able to, you know, kind of be the leader in that situation, and kind of help other people deal with the stress that was going on. You know, that, even though I learned these things, it didn't surprise me, because even when, you know, growing up and when I knew him, he was always that kind of guy anyway. So so it was more kind of expositional things that I learned about Jim during those years that we hadn't, you know, that we didn't know where he was. And I think the other thing I learned about Jim was just how many friends and how many people he touched throughout his life. I mean, he never really settled in one place. He was in Chicago, he was in Phoenix doing Teach for America. You know, he went to 4 universities, and then he was overseas and he traveled all over the place. So he was this very transient character. And after, you know, after he died and during the, you know, at the memorial, I just saw all these people from all walks of life kind of congregate, and you know, and I really learned how many people he affected throughout his life, and that was really great. So.
Do you have another question? Go ahead, Danielle.
What do you think James's opinion would have been on the Syrian refugees crisis, like in America?
Say that one more time.
Here, maybe come down. I think when we ask the questions, we might need to come on down. Come on down. A little too far away.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I want you to be able to hear him. Yeah.
What do you think James's opinion would have been on for the Syrian refugees crisis in America? Like, what would his opinion be on taking them in?
Being taken them into our country.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking? I mean, there's no question he would have, you know, he would have welcomed them and of course be open and want a policy from our government that, you know, we should allow Syrian refugees, you know, homes and to enter the country. You know, I have, you know, that's my opinion, of course, but I think that there's definitely I could be pretty sure that he would be for that. You know, I think, you know, Jim, the film is pretty apolitical. It doesn't, you know, it broaches some things, but I think one thing also that I learned about by doing this film is, you know, there's this big focus on ISIS and the Syrian refugee crisis. And currently, I think a lot of the opinions in America are, you know, this anti-Syrian refugees entering the country because of, you know, saying things like they're terrorists and it's a way for them to infiltrate the country. But it's just really bizarre to me because it has nothing to do with, I think anyway, you know, Syrian refugees being terrorists. I mean, these are civilians that are fleeing their country because they are being attacked and bombed by their own government and these extreme jihadist groups. So I just think it's a really misinformed opinion to just have a blanketed statement saying you should not let Syrian refugees into the country because of those reasons. To me, it's absolutely ridiculous. So, and again, like, I think this is why it's really important for journalists to be out there, because they can kind of get these messages out there. But for certain, I think Jim would totally be on board on helping them and trying to let them in, because that's what he was doing there. You know, these are the civilians and the citizens that he was reporting on. So yeah.
Next. Did you want to, I think, which one did
Can
you
you
like?
ask Annie Hastings' question?
Yes.
What was the most difficult?
Okay, yeah.
scene to-
So Brian, what was the hardest scene to direct in this film, and why?
The hardest scenes to direct, I would probably say, were the recreations that I did for the captivity section. You know, we had this. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and we had this 70,000 square foot warehouse out in Queens where we filmed all of those recreations. And, you know, we built the set, and I had, I wasn't trying to actually recreate the actual space. It was more a very kind of tableau graphic approach to a space that, that they were in. I had talked to Pierre, who was the French hostage with the brown sweater on, and he's actually an artist as well. And so, he was able to draw me some references, like he drew the door and the window and kind of an overview of what that space looked like. So from that, I was able to kind of build this set, which is essentially like a rectangular cell, and it had removable. But it was hard because it was just very surreal doing that, because I was essentially recreating Inst while he was missing, and it was just, I don't know, that was really difficult because it's to kind of be in that space and direct these scenes of these stories that I was told. It was really emotional. It was hard. It was about 5 days, and so it in a way, you kind of like I had this like weird feeling that I was there, but I wasn't, and so it was this kind of like almost theatrical experience as well. So that was definitely, I think, the most difficult part of the film to direct.
I have a question about the hostages. How did you get a hold of how did you come in contact with them for the film?
Yeah.
How did you take those stories and kind of make them into a documentary, or that last part, like you said, it showed like kind of the humanity of Jim. How was that? Just all that they told you, and like?
Yeah.
Wow.
So Diane, Jim's mom, was in touch with a lot of them as they got released. There's the scene in the film where she meets Didier, one of the French journalists. She goes to Paris. Both her and John go to Paris to meet with him. And so she got to know them through the experience, and so she was able to put me in touch with those guys. And so I flew to Paris. I took my crew, and we did those interviews in Paris because there were 3 French and Daniel, the blonde Danish journalist. He flew in, meet us as well. And then actually there were 2 other journalists who weren't in the film that I interviewed as well. And we flew to Barcelona to interview them, but I didn't put them into the film because there's so many characters. I did a lot of interviews, so but that's how I eventually that's how I got to them. And then they were really long interviews. I mean, I think I sat for like 4 hours with all of them, and so there were a lot of what you saw in the film was a pretty small percentage of the information that I found out. And I also met with 2 others that actually didn't want to be on camera. So there was a lot of information and stories that I found out just personally, and Mike Foley, Jim's brother, and Katie Foley, Paris with me, and were there for those interviews. So that was a really powerful experience as well. So yeah.
Max, and then Ashley.
Do you feel in any ways that Jim's work abroad has influenced this year's presidential election?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I couldn't say that his work that he was doing has influenced the election. I would say maybe, maybe not, but I would say that his death certainly has. When we had the premiere on HBO, this was February 6th. I was watching the premiere, and then I was watching Twitter because I just found it interesting to see like what people were tweeting as this premiere of the film was going on HBO. And probably about halfway through the film, the Twitter started to populate with what was going on with the Republican debate that night that was running at the same time as the premiere. And Trump actually mentioned James' name in during one of those circus debates that they have. So, and so, again, it was like this, utilizing what happened to Jim in the dialogue of, to have Jim's name in the dialogue of presidential debates was just, is another kind of surreal thing that happened. So, so I definitely think that how he died has influenced the presidential, run, and may continue to. He's been mentioned a couple times.
Great, thank you. Ashley, go ahead.
What my question was more about was, what do you think the best thing that we can do as a school community, as a town, to preserve the legacy that Jim would have wanted for himself, or that what he would have wanted us to know about what was going on? What do you think the best thing that we as a community can do to preserve that for him?
Sure. Well, I think there's a lot of layers to that question as well. I'll start from like the top. There's, you know, the Diane Foley started the James W. Foley Legacy Foundation, which I don't know if you guys know about it or heard about it, but she started this foundation to do a number of things. One is to help U.S. American families who have hostages, family members who are hostages abroad currently, to garner support and help them manage how to deal with it. Obviously, you know, our government their policy is that they do not negotiate. So the foundation is set up for that, and they're actually working with our government to set up some groups, and I think they call it a fusion cell, which allows families and government to interact and kind of support each other. And then the other thing the foundation does is it helps support journalists, freelance journalists. So whether that comes with training or making sure they have the proper equipment, helmets, flak jackets, being able to, you know, helping them to coordinate with people they need to know. You know, if you decide you're going to go into a war zone, you know, you need to have a fixer, someone who's going to translate and show you around. You need to have a driver who can be there if you need to get places. Just having the right contacts. And then the third thing is education. So kind of it's based on Jim's Teach for America career and kind of helping you know, childhood education, which is kind of a bigger thing. But so if you wanted to support the foundation, you know, last year they did a 5K run fundraiser, and they were doing a screening down in Washington, D.C. later this year. So supporting the foundation is a really great kind of start. It's kind of like an overall thing. As far as like the communities, you know, specifically Kingswood or Wolfboro, you know, I think it's just conversation and pretty simple, just kind of keeping the dialogue open about, you know, what interests you about the way Jim, you know, lived his life, and you know, talking about journalism and talking about things that you feel are important about his life and the you know, things that you might have learned in the film. You know, ultimately, I think Jim is now this historical figure, whether we like it or not, and I think it's kind of a reason that I did this film, because I wanted people to know who he was. He wasn't just this American journalist in the desert who was killed by ISIS. There was this amazing man behind him, and so I think just kind of keeping his legacy alive and what he was trying to do in Syria, you know, that translates to a lot of different things. And you know, it's, you know, I don't want to be corny or anything, but it's all about like helping people and kind of looking at yourself and figure out ways that you can do things for the community that kind of connect people rather than pull people apart. You know, another huge kind of like theme. So, you know, I think those things are pretty easy things to try to do. You know, you know, a lot of documentaries have these big like call to actions, which, you know, it's like, you know, environmental documentaries like write your senator and congressman, and you know, you're like, oh God, I gotta write a letter, like who's gonna read that, you know? So it's, you know, I think the call to action to this film is a lot simpler, and it's more about kind of how you're gonna go about your lives, and kind of making you think about the world, the bigger world that's out there. I think it's really important to realize that we have it really good. Like you know, especially, you know, I grew up in Wolfboro, just like you guys, or Ossipee or Tuftonboro, or I'm not sure where everybody's from, but you know, we have a pretty amazing opportunities with our lives. And I think don't ever take it for granted, because as you see in the film, there are kids being bombed every day, and there are people that have no homes, and it's crazy. It's really, really crazy. So I think realizing that is really good to know, and understanding that there's a lot going on in the world that's really terrible.
Do you have another question? Do one last one. We told you 8:30. We already kept you a little
Do you
late.
guys want to know what it was like in high school? Do you want to do that one?
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. Kingswood. We want the Kingswood dirt.
The Kingswood version.
All right. Go ahead, Al.
Kingswood
Ask the
dirt?
question.
Oh boy, turn up the volume on this one. Hold on. Kings of Dirt. Well, you know, when I was there from, let's see, I graduated in 1992. So yeah, 88 to 92 was my freshman to senior. And I mean, I drove by the school maybe 5 months ago, and it looks nothing like it used to. You know, I think they expanded the buildings. There are buildings on like the soccer fields that I used to play, and so it's a very different like architecture and like space. That's not so much dirt, but that's just as far as like a physical space. That's what's changed. You know, I mean, Jen, what were you 1 year ahead of me, or?
I was I graduated in '89, so I was in Kate's grade, but I was here just through middle school, and then I wasn't here for high school.
Right. Okay, yeah. So my sister was in your teacher's class, and I don't know. I mean, what has changed? I mean, I have 2 kids now in Brooklyn, in New York City, so I see what's going on in public schools in New York City. But when I was there, it was pretty. Gosh, I mean, I was pretty tame. I wasn't real rebellious.
Oh, come on, Brian.
I was a pretty good student. We were kind of nerds. We didn't really have girlfriends, and we were pretty lame. But I love sports. Do you guys have like lacrosse now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't have lacrosse, but we had soccer and football and tennis, like the basics. But I'm sure it's like much more expanded. But yeah, I'm trying to think of. Do you guys still do the like pep rallies?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we had the pep rallies, and I'm sure the gymnasium is now really nice, but we would like cram into the gymnasium and make banners for if we were freshmen through senior. And what else did we did the snow sculptures. Do you guys do that?
No. Bring it back.
Well, you probably don't have any snow anymore.
True.
When I grew up, we actually had snow, but now with like the crazy climate, it's like Florida up there at this point. But so yeah, there was all these competitions. We like built snow sculptures, and we had a talent show where we had to like, perform, make these like ridiculous performances in the pep rally. So I don't know. I'm sure it's much more interesting if you guys told me what you guys do now. What I did was probably like, oh my god, this guy's so old. And like, so I wonder. Do you guys have Mr. Little? But that was junior high.
Yeah.
All right. So Dean Little was my 7th grade English, I think. Was he English?
Yeah. There
So
you go.
he was there. I'm trying to think who's been there for more than 20 years.
Mr. Merrill.
Mr. Merrill?
Yeah. Mr. Lush.
Merrill. Oh, is Mr. Wilson still there?
Yeah.
That guy is awesome. That was his class. But I was an architecture student. I went to Syracuse University for architecture because of Mr. Wilson. So learned, that guy's got a lot to teach, so I'd take his class. Gosh, I don't know if there's anybody else who's been there that long, but, a great teacher that I had was Mel. I'm sure he might not be, but you might have heard of him. Have you ever heard of Mr. DeSalle?
Yeah.
He's like Kingswood lore, but he was fairly older when I was there, so I don't think he's there anymore. Anyway, so that's cool that you guys had some of my same teachers.
All right, do you guys let everybody, any final questions for the internet or anything like that? That's everybody, interwebs. Are we good? Okay, Brian, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
It was great. Thank you. Very much appreciated.
For sure.
And maybe if things work out in June, perhaps.
Yeah, I talked to, so we're taking the film to the Sheffield Film Festival.
Oh, are you?
Which is in Sheffield, UK,
Yep.
in England. And it's that weekend, but I talked to them, and I said, hey, there's this event that I want to do, and so they're gonna try to program around it, so I'll talk to you guys later about it, but
Possible.
I mean, it's an amazing honor, I appreciate it, so.
That's Brendan.
I'm right.
Brendan right here is the senior class president. So
Thank
he
you.
came here to give official
You actually-
plug.
You made a haunted house in my great grandparents' house.
Oh.
I'm Michael Cupper's cousin.
No, you
Is
are.
my-
I didn't know that.
is your uncle?
No, he's my cousin.
He's your cousin.
Yeah, but that's my great grandparents. I found a picture and I brought it to Mr. Cupper the other day.
Oh, yeah, there's your shirt.
Yeah. So yeah, but we would be honored if you could speak. That would be on behalf of our class. That would be.
I mean, I really appreciate it,
Yeah.
and I would love to do it, so that would be amazing. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll work on the logistics then.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank
So
you.
wait, so Michael's your cousin.
His mom is Linda, and so Linda's my
Right.
grandmother's sister.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
so-
I've been in touch with Michael.
Yeah.
Mike gave me some, oh man, we had some stories. I'm sure off camera, we could tell you some things.
Yeah.
Here's the story.
He was a wild man.
Yeah.
Marco Rubio dropped out about 10 minutes.
What's that?
You say? Sorry.
Yeah, I said, thanks so much.
Oh, thank you,
Thank you.
Brian.
Thank you so much for doing it. Awesome. You can tweet to #FoleyKnight. This is our big. Get on there. Tweets are on there. Thanks, Brian.
Bye, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to take this home.
Okay. That was a great question. You did great. We loved it. All right, does everybody get these in my room? Somebody take this.
Just so I graduated with my two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yay! You did it! Yay! Good job! Yay! He wants, I think,
Actually, I do now.